You know, some might say that that's a pretty big figure, but why don't we get something a bit bigger? Now, that's pretty darn big considering everything, but can we get something maybe a little bit bigger? Goodness, if only we could find something big enough. Oh, wait a minute. I'd say that's pretty darn big. Yes, that's correct. Today's figure is going to be the Super Mario Ultra Big Action Figure, Bowser. We know it says that because it says Super Mario Ultra Big Action Figure, Koopa. Yes, because his name is indeed Koopa in Japanese, but we all know him as Bowser. So this is actually a figure that I won out of an arcade machine in Japan. Yes, this would be a Taito figure that I won out of an arcade machine, which was this weird little light game where there was a light going around in circles, there were two arms holding the figure box, of which you had to stop it on the exact right unit to loosen up that spot. I had to do it twice to win this, so this was actually pretty difficult. But to be honest, compared to some other figures, it was pretty easy to win. I'm really excited to see what's inside here because this is a huge box, and the figure inside is, from what I can understand, pretty darn big as well. I got this in October, so as of then it was still in arcades. I'm not quite sure if it still is, but I'm sure you could probably find it online, but importing it might cost a little because this is a rather large box. Carrying it home was a pain in the butt. The box is wonderful looking. It's very green and everything is accented rather nicely with this bit of white, and all the text on it looks awesome. There's even some spiked bands on there to kind of show off his bracers and the aesthetic there. What may be coolest of all is his eyes that are kind of just peeking off the top through the darkness. It's a really cool little effect here. This was designed rather nicely. I love Bowser. He's one of my favorite characters from Nintendo. I've even cosplayed him, so without further ado, let's open this thing up. And as soon as we open it up, there is a gash in the cardboard, which makes it look like he slashed it open. The red behind it for the second flap really does create an awesome effect for the way that it's folded up. So this is getting a lot of kudos for packaging for an arcade machine figure. Oh, I did not expect this. It would seem that Bowser is in several pieces. You know, I don't recall how he looked in the machine, but I guess I was crazy to think he would be anything besides huge, because, man, this is massive. He was so disassembled that, goodness, I don't know where I'm going to put him when he finally is all together, but let's get into plugging everything in. He came with a small page worth of instructions, which actually shows you how to put everything together, so that is appreciated, but of course the Japanese text can throw some people off. Everything seems fairly simple though, a lot of just plugging in slot A to hole A or whichever, so let's put him together now. The compartmentalization is actually pretty good. Inside of his torso, you can actually find his hair, his spikes, and even his tail, so there's a lot going on here. And the way that his arms plug in, you can actually see that there's sockets with little divots in them, which allows the pieces to actually lock in place, so that's appreciated. The first thing that it instructs you to do is to take his arm and actually plug it in and twist it until it locks. And there's a nice loud click to let you know that you've done it right. Once inside, it can turn, but I would not recommend it. His other arm is inside the shell, so let me fish that out. Knowing that the arm was inside of there, they went ahead and carefully bubble wrapped it to disallow it to scratch from banging around inside the shell, so that's nice because this thing was a pain to get home from Japan. I actually had him in my luggage. And goodness, he's already got his arms plugged in and he is just too huge already. The next step is to plug in the legs, which look like they will plug in much the same way. And now the big boy can kinda stand, but he needs some more weight on his back so he doesn't tip over. There are tabs on both sides and the top and bottom of his back, so you'll plug that right into the shell, but be careful, these are a bit rigid, so you don't want to snap anything, so just be mindful plugging him in. And now that that's all plugged in, if we turn him around, we can see the many pegs on his back. Now, all the pegs on his back are the same exact size, but you will want to differentiate this from the two pegs that go onto his tail. These spikes are actually a little bit smaller, and as you can see, this one has a curve in it because it goes just under his shell right here. So just make sure you're plugging in the right things. And it's a very simple fitting. It looks like it'll just plug right on. And I'll say that looks pretty impressive. But like I said, his tail does have two spikes, of which go here. Just make sure you're lining up the correct shape when you're putting it on. And his tail is complete and it can plug in right beneath his shell. Now there's one last piece that we can't forget, and that is his lovely red coif of hair. This is going to plug in very easily, just a hollow bottom, and it goes right over the peg on the top of his head. So just be mindful plugging it in. This is a somewhat more malleable plastic, but you don't want to break anything, so don't do this if it's too cold. And just like that, Bowser is now complete. And I've got to say, I was not expecting him to be this big. I remember walking past a shop in Akihabara where he was actually displayed outside, and I saw him and thought, no way, that's not the thing that I won, right? But yeah, this thing is comically huge. For instance, the SH Figuarts Bowser looks like he's Bowser Jr. riding atop of this big boy. This thing is magnificently large. He's actually just about 11.5 inches tall when you measure him from his feet to the top of his spike here. That's pretty darn large. And it's nothing compared to just how much wingspan this boy has. He is a whopping 16 inches wide. That is massive. If we turn him around, we can see that he is just about 14 inches deep. And seriously, I'm an adult man and look at my hand on his face. It's nothing. And funnily enough, he is listed as a super big action figure, so does he have articulation? Yes, somehow he does. You can actually move his arms up and down ever so gently, but I would not recommend it. The one arm's a little easier to move than the other, but it just doesn't sound right. I feel like I'm gonna break something. His legs are the same, in which they can be moved, but that's a terrible sound. Quality-wise, it's not the best. There's a lot of fractures where you can see things don't quite line up. Most of him is hollow, and thus there are many parts where you can see where the two pieces come together. It doesn't ruin the figure, because obviously enough, this thing was not meant to be super high detailed. There's no way that they would put this thing in an arcade machine if it was super high detailed, not hollow, really heavy, and all that other stuff. It just couldn't go. There would be too much plastic. And what you're getting here is just what you want, a gigantic Bowser, which is how we see him. Next to a small Mario figure, this truly looks like a proper representation of the boss. Don't talk to me or my son ever again. So in the end, I actually really like this thing. Despite it being a bit cheap, I will say that it's done rather well. Everything was compartmentalized in a way that allowed you to win this thing in the arcade, not knowing how big it was, take it home, and be really surprised and happy with the way it turns out. But that doesn't mean the quality's the best. There is hardly any painting, which means that there's really not that much detail in regards to the way that it could be accented or shaded. He's mostly just plain colors, flat colors. He looks very much like the video game. And that's not bad. In the right lighting, he might look really awesome. In the blinding purity of bright white lights, sure, things stick out pretty badly, but this is, I think, meant for children. This could be a huge toy, but ultimately, I think it's a great collector's piece too. This would look awesome in anybody's den or their game room where they keep all their old games and stuff. So I'm actually not mad at all about the fact that I spent maybe $10 to $20 trying to win him. He was actually pretty easy when you consider it compared to some other machines, and thus I ended up with one of my favorite video game characters as a huge arcade prize that seriously surprised me when I got it out of the box. So with all that said, I have to give the ultra big action figure of Bowser himself a 7 out of 10. Like I said, he's not perfect. There's things that could certainly be improved, but this is definitely great for the money that you might pay. I would say don't go any higher than 30 if you bought him online, and if you do get him at that price, I'd say he's a pretty good bargain. If you're a big Bowser fan like me, definitely look into getting this figure, especially while it's still in arcades and you can probably find it in pretty high volume. But what do you think? Is this figure cool, or do you think it's just a little too cheap looking? Let me know in the comments below. If you liked the video, make sure to like it and subscribe to the channel because I make figure reviews every week. I'm also going to leave something on screen for you to check out, so if you haven't seen it, or even if you have, go ahead and click it. It does help the channel either way. And with that, thank you so much for watching, have an amazing weekend, and keep on collecting.